Okay, we're ready to make our quilted tote bag. So for this project, there is also a PDF download that has the pattern and all the fabric that you're going to need. I'll just quickly go over what you're going to need. You're going to need a freezer paper square that's 14.5 inches. You're going to need your small project 14.5 inch block. I'm going to use a fat block for this tutorial, but you could use skinny to make this tote if you would like as well. You're going to need some background triangles. We're going to make this into the octa-compass block. For the back side of the tote, you're going to need 9 squares of fabric. You're going to need a gusset. You're going to need lining fabric, and you're going to need some strips for binding to finish out our quilted tote. So that's what you need to get started. When we come back, we're going to transform this block into an octa-compass block. All right, we're going to take our raw block and we're going to finish it using the octa-compass no circle finishing technique. And so what's fun about this is, even though this block is looking round now, we are going to finish it without having to cut any circles. We're going to square this up twice into an octagon, add 4 triangles, and we will be done and have a block to move forward in our project. So in your book, the 4th chapter is the octa-compass chapter. So pink in the fat, navy blue in the skinny. So I'm on page 2. There are 2 methods here on page 2 for trimming that block into the octagon shape. The top is going to show you using a square up ruler, and the bottom is using a freezer paper square. For this tutorial, I'm going to use the freezer paper square method because I think it's kind of foolproof. It's a little easier way to get these finished. So that's the method I'm going to show you. Once we get it squared up into the octagon, then we're going to add these triangles right to the corners to finish off our blocks. So I'm going to set these books aside for a second, and I will walk you through how we are going to get this shaped into an octagon. So I've got my block, and I got my 14.5 inch freezer paper square. So the first thing is make double sure that your square is 14.5 inches. It's not going to do you any good if it's a little less than 14.5 or too big, right? Needs to be 14.5 inches. So just make sure before you move forward. Once you have your square cut, I want you to fold it into quarters with nice crisp folds, okay, nice and neatly, so that we have those north, south, east, west folds that are going to help us line it up on our block. Then at each of those folds, I want you to measure in 1/4 inch from the edge and just make a little mark with a pencil or pen, whatever you want to do. So I've done that on all 4 of those folds. Then you're going to come in and you're just going to fold the paper, make a little fold at each of those marks so that it's already folded and ready to go. All right, so I've got my prepared sheet. Now we are going to take this, and the first thing you want to make sure is you've got your block oriented the way that it's going to be when it's done, okay? So you get to choose if you want your 0.1 points up at the top, north, south, east, west, or your 0.2 points. And I'm going to look here. I'm happy with this orientation. So this is how I want it. You're going to take your freezer paper square, and you need to be at your ironing board. I am going to fold back that fold where we folded at the 1/4 inch. Where the fold is, I want to put that at the top of the point, and then the same thing at the bottom. So when I pull these back, they should be on the points or just a little beyond the points. You want to make sure you're centered between the points. Why I like this method is now when I let go, right, I'm adding my 1/4 inch seam. There's no way that I am not going to have a 1/4 inch past that point if I make sure the fold is there to begin with, okay? So I've got that one. I'm just going to hit that with the iron to hold it in place. Make sure I'm here, okay? All right, now we're going to do east and west. So the point is here, here's my fold, and sometimes you gotta make it move the paper where it's supposed to be. So I'm gonna put that one there. And when I fold that back, I'm just gonna put that one there. So now I know I've got my 1/4 inch beyond all of those points. Okay. So I'm going to take this now, move that a little bit, grab my cutter, and now we're just going to cut this flush on all 4 sides. So I'm just going to cut it flush with the freezer paper. So I'm just matching the ruler up right to the edge, and I'm going to make those 4 cuts. Okay, I've made my 4 cuts, so I'm going to pull that off. So now you can see those 4 cuts have been made. Now we need to turn this 45 degrees. So make sure, I pressed a little wrinkle in there, so I'm going to fix that. Make sure you don't have it turned like this, right? We need to have 2 points. If you started with the 2 points, north, south, east, and west, now we need to have this set, north, south, east, and west, okay? Now we're just going to repeat that process. So I'm going to get that fold at the top of the point, look down here, make sure I am right on, and I am. So I'm going to just press those into place. Now, yep, that's right where it's supposed to be. And this one, I'm just going to move it into place. Sometimes you just have to move it a tidge, but we want to make sure. I think I moved my paper, so I want to make sure. Oh no, I'm right. Okay. Okay. So once I've got it, let's just press it on there really well. And now we're going to cut it flush on these 4 sides. So you can just line it up with the paper. You certainly could do this with scissors as well. Okay, so I'm going to bring this back. And now I have got my octagon. And you can see I've got my nice 1/4 inch at all of those points because the paper, by folding it back, that gave us our 1/4 inch seam allowance. All right, now make sure you're happy. I'm going to get it back to my happy side. I like this side the best. And now we're going to take these triangles, and these were cut from 5.5 inch squares, and then you just cut them on the diagonal. And just make sure you're happy. I'm going to move this guy down here, put him up there. Okay, so these are oversized, so they're bigger than they need to be because we're going to sew them on, and then we'll trim up the block just to make it nice and square to move forward. So you're just going to fold these over, and then this point should be right in line, centered, right? And you'll have extra on both ends. So I just go ahead and stick a pin in there and do that on all 4. And then you're going to go and sew your 1/4 inch seam. And we know that we're already good. We're not going to be cutting off any of our points. I'm just going to turn this over. So you're probably going to want to sew on this side because you can see the stitching X's right there. So as long as you stay on that side of the stitching X, right, you're not going to cut your points off. So you should have a 1/4 inch. but that's a good way to make sure. So I'm going to go ahead and get all 4 triangles pinned on, and then we'll sew them, and then when we come back I'll show you how to press them and then get your blocks squared up. All right, I've got my triangles sewn on, and so now all I'm going to do is just press them to the outside. So the seam is going that way. And just a note, so this was a fat block. It's the exact same process to do the skinny as I said before. You just match up on your skinny points. And if you do want to see that process for a skinny block, you can go to the Quilted pouch tutorial, small project, and I'm doing a skinny block there. So if you want to see the difference, but it's really the exact same technique. All right, so I've got those pressed, and now we're just going to square this up. So I do like to use a square up ruler. So I can do 2 sides at a time, or at least a corner at a time. If you've got a bigger square up ruler, that would probably be great, but I'm just going to do a corner at a time and just make sure everything's nice and straight, and we'll just square this up. Okay, my block is squared up and ready to move forward. All right, so I've just been playing with the layout here. These squares are going to become the back side of the tote. So just kind of a fun way to use some extra scraps that you might have left over from a project. So these are really just going to get sewn into a 9 patch. You can choose to press your seams open or just alternate. So out, in, out, right, and then you can nest those seams together when you are sewing them. So I'm thinking if you've made this block, you've made a 9 patch before, so I'm not going to spend time here going over and making a 9 patch. Once you've got that 9 patch made, then you want to get this trimmed down. This will be a little bit oversized. So again, we can trim this down into a 14.5-inch block. So you'll have just a little bit around the edges to trim off. So when we come back, I'll have the 9 patch sewn and have it trimmed up and ready to go on to the next steps. Okay, I've got my 9 patch finished, trimmed down to 14.5 inches. So now we are ready to get our elements quilted. So we've got the front, we've got the back, and then your gusset, which is 5 inches by 43.5 inches. So you're going to want to check, that's the width of fabric. Make sure you have 43.5 inches. Sometimes your fabric is going to come less than that. If so, you're going to want to piece in a little square. I would just piece in a 5-inch square here on the bottom where nobody is going to see it to make sure that your gusset is going to be long enough. So you can quilt this on your domestic machine or on your long arm. If you're going to use your domestic machine, look at the pattern. It's going to have some squares for you to cut for the lining and the batting. So you'll sandwich those together for your front and back, and then also for your gusset. I'm going to quilt mine on my long arm, so I'm going to take a yard of fabric, load it on my long arm, put the batting down, and then quilt these right on to the background. So get them quilted. Once they're quilted, you're going to go ahead and trim them flush with what you have here with the blocks as they are now. So you'll cut flush with the gusset. Don't trim the ends, just cut it flush with the side, and then cut the blocks flush all the way around the outside. So when we come back, I'll have that all done, and then all we have to do is get it put together and add our binding. So here are my finished quilted pieces. I've cut them flush so you can see that they are now fully lined and quilted. Here's the gusset, and I'm just leaving the selvages on the gusset. Leave it as long as I can. Now the next step is just to sew the gusset into the two sides. So I'm going to start with the front, and we are actually going to sew this wrong sides together because we are going to bind those outside edges when we're done. So I want to make sure I've got the selvage there above because we have a little extra to trim off. I'm just making sure that that selvage is above. If it's a little bit in there, it's okay. That top edge is going to get bound later, so if it could cover that. So I'm just going to stick a pin there and pin here. One more down here. Okay, so the corners, and there is a detail in your pattern, but when you get to the corners, we're just going to turn the corner here. And where that corner is, I'm going to recommend that you just make a very tiny slit, less than 1/4 of an inch, right? Because we're going to be sewing our 1/4 inch seam. So I've got that split, and it'll just make it easier to go around the corner. So I'll just go ahead and get the rest of this pinned really quick so you can see. All right, so same thing here. We're going to turn that corner. Okay, so where that is, right there, just give it a little slit so that it makes turning that corner a little bit easier. There we go. And that. And then you can see I've got plenty of room here then at the other side. All right, so I'm going just to go ahead and sew my 1/4 inch seam around. So when you get to that corner, try not to get the fold in there. Try to just do your 1/4 inch, turn the corner, and keep going. And that little slit should help you keep that in place. So I'm going to sew all the way around there. Again, wrong sides together because when we're done, we're going to bind this outside edge. So I'm going to go sew that, and then we'll come back, and then we'll get the back part ready to sew in. All right, so I've got this sewn on, right? So wrong sides together because we're going to bind these outside edges. So now we're going to sew this gusset onto our back. Again, wrong sides together. So you're going to want to just make sure that you start in the same spot so we're even. So notice how I'm getting this even up here at the top, so that I'm going to go ahead and pin there. And then I'm going to do the same thing over here because I want to make sure that I'm sewing the gusset in evenly on both sides. So, and it is sticking up, right? We're going to trim that off a little bit later. All right, so wrong side to wrong side. I'm going to pin down one side. Pin in here. And then pin down this other side. There's lots of ways you can do this. You know, you may have your own ideas about the best way to get this sewn together, but I'm just showing you how I go about it. Okay, so now we've got the bottom, and we're gonna get those corners in there, and so I can find where my corner is. I'm gonna go in and make that little slit. I'll put a pin right there. And then right there. Okay, and I'm going to do the other side. Again, we'll get that little slit cut. All right, pin here. in here. All right, and then all we have to do is just get the bottom edge pinned. All right, so now I'm just going to do the same thing. I'm going to sew my 1/4 inch seam all the way around, being careful at those corners. Okay, so I've got the gusset sewn to the back. So you can see my bag is together now. It's actually standing up on its own already. So now what we're going to do is add the binding to these outside edges. So I had you cut 3 pieces of binding. I've just folded them wrong sides together in half to make my binding. So 1 strip will go around the front, 1 strip will go around the back, and then lastly will go around the top. So I'm not going to trim the gusset yet. I'm going to wait till I get this front and back binding on. And you're just going to add this binding on here just like you would a quilt. So you'll just start here at the top, you'll come down, we're going to miter those corners, right? Go around and finish up at the top. So I'm going to sew it on the front and the back. You're going to want to take a fat 1/4 inch seam. So we sewed this 1/4. We want this to be over, and I've had you cut the binding so you can use a fat 1/4 inch seam, but we just want to make sure we're on the other side of our stitching, right? We don't want that stitching to show. So I'm just going to go ahead and sew the binding on the front and the back, and then we'll come back and move forward from there. All right, I've sewn my binding onto the front and to the back. So now we just need to get this sewn on. If I turn it around, you can already see how nice and neat that's going to make that edge look. So I'm just going to use my clips. We'll just bring this around, get it clipped all the way around. Again, you can machine or hand sew. I'm going to hand sew. I just think for me it will be easier. If you are more experienced with bag making, then maybe you would want to do it by machine. But I'm just going to get that sewn down the front and the back. Then we'll come back and get the last binding on. All right, I've got the front binding and the back binding sewn on. So the bag is looking really sharp now. It's really going to stand up nice for me when it's done. So now we just need to get this trimmed at the top and add our binding to the top part of the bag. So to trim the top, I'm just going to get it going. There we go. Just lean it over. And basically you're cutting right from the top of this back side to the front side here. So you just want to make sure you're keeping things out of the way. We don't want to cut anything we're not supposed to. But if I put my ruler from that point to that point and give it a cut. All right, so now I've got it. So you can see that now I'm flush there. Do the other side. Easier to see it this way. So I'm going from there to there. Again, just being careful. All right, so now my bag is flush at the top. And now I just need to add the binding around the top. So I'm actually going to sew it on starting in the back. And you're going to sew just like you would a quilt. So I'm going to start sewing here, add it all the way around, end up here. Then I'm going to have to join my ends, right, to finish it. And I'm sewing on the outside of the bag so it'll get turned to the inside when we're done. When you get to, as you're sewing on the binding, when you get to the gussets, I'm going to recommend just turning those bound edges toward the gusset for a little bit of a neater finish. And I'm actually going to trim, I didn't quite get this one trimmed as well as I would like. I'm going to trim that up just a little bit better. But yeah, so when you're sewing the binding, just push those gussets toward, or press those binding seams toward the gusset as you go. So when I come back, I'll have the binding sewn on, and all we'll have left to do is add our handles. All right, I've got the binding sewn around the top so you can see my bag is all together. So now we just need to add some handles. And I'm just going to use some 1-inch webbing fabric for the handles. You certainly can make up some fabric handles if you want. I'm having you cut your webbing 26 inches and then fold your ends under 1 inch on either end. And then we're going to go ahead and attach these. And so you could just kind of eyeball it, but you do want it to be uniform. So I'm putting these about 1 3/4 inches down from the top, but I don't want to cover my pretty point there. So I'm just going to the left of that point. Let me just stick a pin in there. Hold it. And then we'll do the same thing over here. So I'm just kind of eyeballing it. I want it to be the same. Measure down 1 3/4 inches so we get them the same distance down. All right, so once we get that in, then I'm going to go ahead and just measure for the other side. All right, and to do that, we just want to make sure the handles are centered, right? And then we're just going to put them right in the same place, 1 1/4 or 1 3/4 inches down. Stick a pin there. And over here. This way the handles will be the same length when we're done. All right, so I have those pinned, and then you'll refer to your pattern, but I'm just going to make kind of a square with an X through it to attach these to the bag. So it'll be nice and secure. They're not going to rip off or pull off. So I'm going to go ahead and do that, and then we'll come back and look at our finished bag. All right, so I've added those handles. So it's a little hard to see here. At the end of this video, I will add some pictures of it sitting upright so you can see what it looks like. But got the handles on the front and the back and ready to go. So I thought I would show you a picture of another bag that I made. This is in a different fabric way, totally different, but it just kind of gives you an idea of what it might look if you're using other fabrics. So just another idea for you if you wanted to make another one. And then how cute would it be if you gave this as a gift and then you put in that little wallet that we made also in the small projects inside, or for yourself. So anyway, hope you're having fun with these small projects, and hopefully you'll go on to do some of the others.